I got the idea to share a summary of the Last Supper from my cousin Ellen. So here it goes. This is Leonardo's Last Supper that he painted for the Duke of Milan in Milan between 1495 and 1498. And we can see it's for the Duke of Milan because we see the crest of the Duke on the arches above the painting. And we notice there's three arches, which represent the Trinity. We notice there's three walls that represent the Trinity. And we notice there's three windows that represent the Trinity. So the Duke of Milan was a very wealthy and powerful man in Milan. He's kind of like the king of Milan. And he hires Leonardo not to be an artist, but to be an engineer and to help him plan for a military invasion he knows is coming from the French, from the King of France. But while Leonardo is in the employment of the Duke of Milan, he is given the commission to paint the wall of the refectory, which is the dining room of the abbey at the Cathedral of Milan, largely because the Duke of Milan, who's Ludovico Sforza, has been collecting interest on loans, and that's known as usury. And usury was a sin in the Middle Ages. So any wealthy person who's collecting usury knows they're in trouble. And so one way of getting yourself out of trouble is to hire someone to paint a beautiful religious painting in a religious establishment. And he's not the only one to figure this out. So he hires Leonardo to paint the Last Supper in the dining room of where the monks would eat dinner. So here's the dining room, and here's the Last Supper. And the monks would have sat here at tables looking at this Last Supper, at the Seder. Dinner is what it is. So it's almost like a wedding where the wedding party is sitting elevated above the guests. And we see then that it's a supper and it's in a dining room, so it makes perfect sense. We notice that there's the 12 apostles in groups of 6 and 6, or more importantly, 3, 3, 3, 3. So we have Trinity, 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 Trinity. And then we have 4 threes. So this is the evangelists. We have 4 evangelists and 3 trinities. So we keep playing around with that 3, 4, 6, 12 number system. Also on the back walls, these were tapestries, and tapestries kept rooms warm in the Middle Ages or in ancient times. But it also suggests that this room, that whoever owned this room had some money, because if you owned a tapestry, you were wealthy. So we noticed that this is part of the decor of this Seder, which also includes a cloth on the table. So all of this suggests that these are not poor people. They're not necessarily loaded, but they are not scavengers. And then we notice that the 12 apostles each react to the announcement that Jesus, who also is shaped like a triangle, so he represents the Trinity, that he has made this announcement, one of you will betray me. And the second he says it, everybody just panics and reacts in a very different way. So we have here on the left, this is Bartholomew, and he is a member of the Roman military, and that's why you see him in his military garb. And we notice he's stood up with this, like his hands slapped the table, and he's angry. He's going to go get these guys. Whoever is going to go after Jesus, he's going to beat them, and he's going to take care of them, just like a good military soldier would do. Next to him is James the Younger. He's the brother of John, who will be sitting here. And both James and John were the fishermen that Jesus calls from from their boats to follow him. So they're one of the original apostles. We have Andrew, who's the brother of Peter. And this is Peter right here. And we notice that Peter has his hand on a knife. And later on in the night, Peter will cut off the ear of one of the soldiers, the Roman soldiers. Next to him in the foreground is Judas, and we see that Judas has his hand on the money bag, and he's also knocked over the salt. And salt was very expensive in ancient Roman times. You were actually paid with salt. it was so expensive. It was like gold. And so to knock over the salt meant you were wasting money. So in a sense, he's wasting the gold in his hands. And on top of that, the word salary comes from salt. You were paid in salt, so that was your salary. Um, so that's why you see salt. So it was a bad luck to knock over the salt. It was also considered a waste of money. Then we have Jesus, who's sitting in the center, again, very much away from the crowd. He's kind of like the divider of these two groups. And then we have Thomas, and we notice that Thomas has his finger up within a week or so, he will be putting that finger into Jesus's side. So you always notice it's Thomas in a painting because of the finger. Next to him is James the Elder. He will become Saint James, and he will be killed in Jerusalem by the sword, and his body will be carried by angels to Spain. And the church Santiago de Compostela is the church named after Saint James. And then we have next to him Philip. Philip is the horse lover. He was like the gentle person in the group, the lover of horses, the lover of people. You can see how his face is very gentle. And he's the patron saint of veterinarians and jockeys and anybody having to do with animals, as is Francis, but Philip is another one. This is Matthew, as in St. Matthew the writer, and he is debating what they just heard. Very much the philosopher is to debate an idea. He's sitting next to Jude Thaddeus. This is St. Jude, and Simon, who's the zealot. And essentially, these three are really the philosophers of the group. So you have like the military people on this end with their weapons, and then you have the philosophers on this end with their, they're going to use brain and they're going to use brawn. And essentially, you have 12 people responding very differently to the message that Jesus has just announced. And one kind of unknown fact about the Last Supper is that it almost was destroyed in World War II at the end of the war in 1944. This is the Last Supper right here. It was sandbagged by the Italian people before the war began because they were concerned that could happen. And you'll notice here's the wall right here that's left, but the bomb almost hit it. And it comes this close. This is how close we came to losing the Last Supper. This is the refectory before the war began, so you can see what it looked like. And this is at the end of the war. It's been rebuilt. This is what it looks like now. And it was paid for, to refurbish it, was paid for by the J. Paul Getty Foundation out of Los Angeles. A ton of money to replace and repair the damage. And that was done in, I think, the 1970s. And then the last cleaning of the painting was completed in the late 1990s. So that is my 5-minute synopsis of the Last Supper that was influenced by my wonderful cousin, Ellen. So thank you for joining me and have a happy Easter.